Now, the month of September, marked annually as Heritage Month, is the start of a new cycle. The countryside starts to turn green and blossoms again after winter. The Spring Equinox occurs on the 23rd of September, and that's the beginning of the African New Year based on the Kemet Calendar. Now, to speak to us more about this heritage and the significance of the African New Year, we're joined by a Custodian of African Indigenous knowledge, Gogo Zanemvula Tsebedze. Very good morning to you. Thank you so much for your time. Interesting aspects here of an African calendar, which also speaks to the African New Year. Really interesting revelations. Share more with us. I mean, most people probably don't even know that an African calendar exists, an African New Year exists.
That's, it's something that's really important for us to acknowledge as African people, is that, a lot of practices, spiritual practices, and a lot of the way also that we operate in the mainstream in the world, a lot of it is rooted in indigenous African knowledge system and African spiritual practices. And our spiritual practices were always based on science and on nature. As African people, our priority was aligning with nature. And so our calendar was based on the movement and the flow of nature. So it was really important for us everything that we did and our livelihoods revolved around the movement and the processes, the natural processes that take place within nature. So our new year is based on the renewal of nature, when nature is renewed, and that's when, like you said, when everything greens again. This was an observance that we called, it was the Spring Equinox. We understood that the Spring Equinox is the beginning of the new year, and this is the time that, we took to celebrate the renewal of nature, the return of the sun, because the Spring Equinox is about the return of the sun, and that is the beginning of spring, and that is when, nature basically is renewed, and it's mating season, and it's just a time for celebrating the return of the sun, because the sun is the source of all life. So it's a celebration of the sun. Solar worship is also just the original spiritual practice in the world before the rise of organized religion. So it's really important as African people that we understand that although now we do practice organized religion, a lot of us are involved in organized religious systems. It's really important to remember that the place that we're coming from before the colonial interruption of our culture and our way of life, alignment with nature was our priority. And so even, in our participation in religion and organized religion, it's really important to understand that even religious practices incorporate practices of nature, of reverence, the reverence of nature and the honoring of nature and alignment with nature. And so it's really important, I think, in my work and in our work as Afro Savvy, we're always our priority is remembering the practice of alignment with nature, because that's how we're able to then connect with our heritage, connect with our lineage and our original spirituality, and that's how we're able to then manifest abundance and manifest results in our lives.
You speak about our original spirituality, as you, of course, mention organized religious systems. How does that then speak to the embodiment of an African person and, also taking into account the decision-making processes of African indigenous knowledge being the basis of that?
Well, it's the foundation of everything. It is the foundation of everything. It's like I said, it's also incorporated into our, the organized religious systems that we abide to today. As an African person, right now we're dealing with the rise of acknowledgement of ancestral honoring. Like I always say, we don't worship our ancestors, we honor them because they are a part of us, and we are the manifestation, we're the living manifestation of them. So speaking, as an African person, it's really important that we remember that and that we don't forget it, because it then helps. It's something that is then, it's there to help us then move forward in a way that is sustainable. Because, you know, a tree without roots falls. You know, it's really important to acknowledge and to nurture our roots. And that's how we're able to then understand who we are, you know, our genealogy and the way that we operate, the way that we navigate this natural world. And so my work is just making sure that we preserve that knowledge and that we educate and we share that knowledge. And that's why we have channels, we have various channels, especially the Afro Savvy YouTube channel is where we educate. We take a lot of time out to interview various traditional healers and custodians of Indigenous African knowledge systems, a lot of people that I've learned from, you know, elders, because they are, you know, they're the ones that are tasked with reminding us of who we are. And it's really important, you know, remembering who we are is of utmost importance, because like I said, a tree without roots, it falls.
How important is it, you know, as you speak about indigenous knowledge, how important is it to perhaps understand why we need to preserve it? Because it's quite broad. I mean, it could speak to health, it could speak to food, it could speak to so many broad aspects. It could be preserving indigenous medicines, which it really falls under a broad umbrella.
It's very because our like I said, our original spiritual practices were holistic. So like you said, it does touch on various aspects of our lives, whether it's to do with our health. Language is one of the most important aspects of our knowledge systems, because a lot of our sacred practices are encoded within our language, just the way that, you know, the way that we speak and the way that linguistically, the way that a lot of our terms are broken down. They're very, very coded. Our language is very coded and very loaded as well. You know, it takes sentences of the English language just to break down the meaning of one Nguni term, or, you know, one a term in Tswana, or whatever, you know, whatever language it is that, you know, that whatever lineage it is that you're coming from. So our indigenous practices are coded within so many different aspects of our lives, and all of it is in alignment with nature. All of our indigenous practices are in alignment with nature. So it's in our food, it's in our muti, you know, our indigenous, our holistic medicines that also come from nature. And it's in our languages, and it's in the way that we communicate with spirit, the way that even our movement, because, you know, as African people, we're very rhythmic. Even those of us who, you know, don't necessarily dance, we're just very rhythmic in the way that we move and the way that we interact with one another. And so being able to tap into that and being able to acknowledge that and understand that about ourselves, it raises our confidence levels, and it raises also just our confidence in our ability to do things, because, you know, as African people, we've been so disenfranchised as a nation and as a continent and as African people, because we've lost so much of what it is that we're coming from. We don't really, you know, have a lot of the foundation of that knowledge. And so it's really important to take an interest, because it begins with just an interest in who am I, where am I coming from, what is my lineage, what is my heritage. And that's what is so important, I think, about Heritage Day, is that it reminds us to at least, you know, acknowledge, even if it's not something that we practice on a daily basis.
Yes.
It's a day that reminds us that, you know, we are coming, there is somewhere that we come from. We do have a vast and a very complex history. It's not as, you know, it's not as simple as just, you know, our downfall, you know, during apartheid and slavery and all of the tragedy that we acknowledge in our history. There's a lot that precedes all of the tragedy, and a lot of it is stories of, you know, we were a thriving people, and we thrived through alignment with nature. Absolutely. And so that's the idea behind also exploring our heritage, especially in this time.
And what are some of the ideas? I mean, you speak about complexities. What are some of the ideas behind something like the Adam's calendar and Inzalo Yelanga? How does that then bode with the formation of the individuality of being an African?
The Inzalo Yelanga, called Adam's Calendar by Western scientists who then came in and discovered, because a lot of our heritage, a lot of our indigenous artifacts were excavated during the colonial interruption. So there's a lot of our artifacts, our sacred artifacts, and our sacred literature that is kept in first world countries, especially like in the UK and in the US. That's where I was exposed to a lot of our sacred literature as well, and our artifacts. The importance of learning about these things is it helps us to understand how how much we predate all of the knowledge that it is that we are more aware of in this day and age. Inzalo Yelanga is the oldest calendar in the history of the world, and it's a rock formation that was placed in alignment with the equinoxes and the solstices, and it was our ancestors' way of preserving and teaching future generations, so that we understand that in terms of a calendar, what the calendar is meant to do is to bring you into alignment with the flow of nature. And Inzalo Yelanga being placed in alignment with the equinoxes and the solstices it serves as a reminder for us, even with the calendars that we use today. It serves as a reminder for us to remember that the original measurement of time, it's to do with the cosmos, and it's to do with the flow of nature. And so Inzalo Yelanga is something that it's a calendar that is in alignment with the cosmos, and it reminds us that we are a cosmic people, and everything it is that we do, once aligned with nature, when we're in alignment with nature and with the cosmos, it's something that then that's when we're able to really move in harmony with nature, and that's what aligns us with who we are naturally as people, and that's when we can tap into our gifts and into our natural abilities that help us to thrive as a nation.
And very lastly, before we let you go, as we introspect and really try to learn more about who we are as a people and where our heritage comes from and who we essentially represent, what are some of the very important affirmations that one should carry within this journey of knowledge, and trying to really ensure that you are in line with African indigenous knowledge and preserving and acknowledging it?
I think the most important affirmation, especially as an African person, especially as an African woman, is to also understand that you are the originator. We hear it quite often that the African woman is the creator of all things. You are the birth of all civilization. So it's really important as African people that we do not live with the inferiority complex that we've come to be so accustomed to, and that has become such a normalized part of our lives. Understanding that you are the originator of everything. That all not only is Inzalo Yelanga the oldest calendar in the world, but we also have the pyramids in Kemet, which also belong to Africa and her people. And all of there's so many monuments around the continent and ancient artifacts around the continent that prove time and time again that we are the originators of all civilization. So it's really important for the African person to understand that you are the originator of everything, and that your ancestors are the originators of everything it is that now we've come to participate in this modern civilization.
Wow, some powerful words. Thank you so much for your time and imparting some of that knowledge. Custodian of African Indigenous Knowledge, Gogo Zanemvula Tsebedze. You are the originator of all civilization. What a fantastic affirmation to carry.